Let me just do a disclaimer real quick. If you are coming to this review with the hopes that I am going to like gush with you over this show, because I feel like this is the kind of show that attracts the kind of audience that would like to like gush together, like, oh my goodness, this show is just, you know, I apologize. That's just not like that's not where this is getting ready to go. I think there were good things and bad things about the show, and so I'm going to discuss those good and bad things. Um, but this is not one of those reviews where like I'm gonna gush about the subject matter, the content, or the characters, like that kind of thing. And I'll explain why if you're interested. Now I kind of demand a little bit more out of quote unquote representation from shows. I want to see black queer people, and so with the teasers and with all of the imagery around Heartstopper, I immediately noticed there was two is another coming of age high school story about two white gay boys. Or I guess one technically I've watched the show, one is gay and one is bisexual. Thing is that I have a problem, and this is prevalent throughout a lot of TV shows, where they will take, I would argue, narratives that are far more interesting and make the character who has the far more interesting story like a tertiary character, make them like a background character. They'll take it's almost like a sheer force of will thing where they will force cisgendered white protagonists into the forefront, even though they are not as interesting or compelling of characters, that their story is not as interesting or compelling. Cool, 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 Brad. Cool, Brad. there. Might not be enough space for this. Hold on a second. If it spills, I'm editing it out. Just enough. All right. Cool, cool, cool. See if that's in the right, probably like right here. I think it's the right spot. Make sure everything's good. Okay, okay. Testing, testing, testing. I feel like maybe this needs to tilt back a little bit. I'll leave it right there. I think that's fine. All right. So what's good, everybody? My name is Morgan Clement. I'm an artist and designer based in Los Angeles, California. I have a clothing line called Matin and Morgan, which is going to be dropping some new stuff here pretty soon. And this is Good Morning Morgan. And today I am drinking again, still working through my Don Carvajal, however you pronounce that, straight out of the Bronx. Specifically their Greco roast. And yeah. Today I wanted to discuss the new Netflix show Heartstopper. They've been advertising it pretty heavily. I've seen it. I mean, it's only been out for probably about a week at this point. And so initially when I started the show, like I really wanted it to largely be reviewing a lot of these coming of age, like queer shows that are coming out now, that are out, have been out and are coming out now. Because I have a lot of opinions on a lot of these different shows, because some of them feel like really, really deep dives into the experience of being like a queer person, a young queer person. And then others feel very contrived and feel forced and not very well done. So when I was putting together the concept for this show, I thought almost exclusively I would be talking about or reviewing queer coming of age stories and TV shows and movies and things like that. I've already written out a lot of like reviews and things like that for a lot of the shows that are already kind of like have already been out. But the issue is that they're like out already. And so I don't want to be the person who's giving like late takes on things. That has been most of my concern this entire time, is that I don't want to give a review for something that's been out for several years, but also I do. I'm late to watching things in the first place. So usually all of my takes are very late. And I was almost going to just go ahead and brand it that and just call it like Morgan's late takes. You know what I'm saying? But I just didn't get around to reviewing any of these shows yet. So this might be a great segue into doing so, reviewing Heartstopper. But before I get too deep into that, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that, like yesterday, when I'm filming this, it's Thursday. I'm filming a lot of these ahead of time, so bear with me. There was kind of like a ruckus on Twitter because Netflix has just laid off a lot of employees for they had a new, I guess like a movie/TV critic space called Tudum. It's supposed to be like the sound that the Netflix like icon thing does when you open the app and when you play their original content, those things. I guess they were building an in-house platform to review their own content, or at least that's how I understood it. And so they evidently, like, I remember hearing that they were doing it. I don't recall a launch. And I think that's probably part of the problem here. I don't recall them launching it. I remember them talking about it. I don't recall them launching it. I don't remember there being any kind of like noise around their launch. Evidently they launched it. Evidently it was already a thing. Like, it's already been out there. They announced it last year sometime. Missed when the launch was. Now, admittedly, like I mentioned this a lot, I'm the type of person where I'm not up on things. I'm like, I don't catch things like most other people do. So it could just be me. You know what I'm saying? It could just be that I didn't catch the launch. I don't know. But yeah, so they launched this with very little noise around it, and then just this week, laid everybody off, or laid a large portion of their staff off. And people are upset because evidently Netflix made a lot of promises to these are journalists, writers. Made a lot of promises to these writers. A lot of them evidently relocated here to the Los Angeles area, I believe. This is where Netflix's corporate offices are. So here to Los Angeles. Promise them stability, because journalism is not really especially freelance journalism is not like a very stable career, and so it ebbs and flows and things. And so made all of these huge promises. I evidently offered them insane amounts of money in comparison to like normal journalistic endeavors and things like that. And so a lot of people took them up on that offer. The other thing to note here is that, from what I understand, a lot of the people who made up the staff were people of color, particularly women of color. A lot of Black women, Asian women. And so, I don't know, it's just a terrible look, right? I couldn't go straight into reviewing a Netflix original series and not acknowledge the fact that Netflix just laid off a whole bunch of Black women and a whole bunch of women of color. I don't know. So I just wanted to take a moment so let me just go through the article real quick, and then we can get into the actual show, I guess. It says, this is a Vice article. It says, Netflix lays off the journalists it just hired. It was not immediately clear how many employees Netflix laid off, or if it plans to continue the website. Just a few months after starting it, Netflix has laid off multiple employees at Tudum, an editorial wing of the company intended to boost the platform's original shows. Tudum was supposed to be a fandom engine for Netflix, designed to support its original content with original editorial content. On the site, you'll find blogs about shows like Old Enough, a popular Japanese reality show airing on Netflix about toddlers running errands, or Inventing Anna, the Shonda Rhimes show about New York scammer Anna Delvey. The site also features news about Netflix shows and exclusive interviews with the people who make them. Essentially, it's designed to be a one-stop shop for all things Netflix related. It's an ambitious venture that saw Netflix explicitly courting and journalists and writers and media who were paid better than most journalism jobs. It was not immediately clear how many employees Netflix laid off, or if it plans to continue the website. Netflix did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Layoffs are very common in journalism. According to the Columbia Journalism Review, over 6,000 writers were laid off during the pandemic. Some of the writers laid off have noted on Twitter that when Netflix approached them, they were told that this would be a different, more stable kind of job. They include a tweet from Alex Zaragoza. It says, aggressively courting journalists, especially POC, throwing money at us, telling us this is going to be different and stable, will be set up for success, then months later pulling the rug out from underneath us. I should have known better than to trust anything with doom in its name. In a Business Insider article published in February, employees said that Netflix wooed them with the promise of more stability and higher wages than journalism has offered in recent years. If Netflix says, we're going to pay you a more than livable wage and let you continue to write about the things that you write honestly, why would you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to do that? One writer told Insider. Tudum officially launched in December of last year. Today, after only 5 months, a large portion of the staff writers for Tudum, including some who previously worked for Vice, have been laid off. Josh Terry, who formerly worked for Vice as a culture writer, said on Twitter that his entire team had been laid off. And then there's a tweet from Josh Terry that says, looks like I have to do this tweet again. Is anyone hiring? Netflix just laid off my team, my job included. It was an incredible few months, and I'm grateful for it, and I'm stoked about whatever is next. Email is in bio. And then a tweet from someone named Nicole says, you're going to see a bunch of tweets from people laid off at Netflix/Tudum today, so please hire us all. And then another one from someone named Yvette Dion that says, Netflix recruited me 7 months ago only to lay me off to lay me and a bunch of other talented people off today, I'm going to take time off to just exist. So please get in touch if you'll have editing and content strategy opportunities open after August. And then she includes her email. And then the last thing it says is, we're just, a quote, we're just getting started. Join us on this journey as we continue to make Tudum better and better for you. Come on in. The site's about page says. I didn't even know that they had a website, right? Like, I don't think that they advertise this at all, which is always so odd to me. Why would you throw money away on content creation and then not advertise around it? That doesn't make any sense to me. And then I just wanted to include a couple tweets. One is from her ad is the journalista, and it says, it is worth mentioning that Netflix actively recruited black women and people of color just to lay them off months later without a second thought. Don't brag about being inclusive when you treat your quote-unquote diversity hires like they're disposable. And then someone else said, Brandon Harden said, all my sympathies to the Netflix Tudum people. I'm looking at the egregious lack of social media support for your work, and Netflix should be ashamed. I'd tag the official Tudum account, but there isn't one. I'm looking at past coverage on Tudum, and the stories you wrote should have done decent numbers on social. Your layoffs shouldn't have happened. Whoever decided to tweet only one story of yours from the main Netflix account since launch should be forced to defend their job. So it seems like no one knew that this was happening. Like, I didn't know that they had gotten off the ground yet, let alone hired a whole bunch of staff and those kinds of things. Seems like a bold gesture, a bold endeavor to actually relocate people to the Los Angeles area if they aren't already living here. Especially with journalism, it's so odd because it seems like you just allow people to live where they already were. So, I mean, I don't know what they were promising. It had to be insane. You know what I'm saying? It had to be a really, really, really good deal to get people who are freelance journalists to relocate to Los Angeles. Los Angeles is not a cheap market. So to leave people high and dry here is just cruel. It just is. So I just wanted to acknowledge that before we... It might put a damper on the review, but I mean, this is the corporation that created, you know what I'm saying? This is the corporation that created the show. So, or at least produced the show. So, you know, I couldn't go without mentioning that. So the show Heartstoppers, I've seen it being advertised across Netflix. I've been watching other shows, and so I was like, I'll get around to it. And initially I wasn't all that, like with the teaser, I wasn't all that, you know what I'm saying? Here's the thing, is that when I was younger and looking for representation, I took whatever I could get. And I think that a lot of people who are younger kind of feel that way. It's like, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's exactly like me. It doesn't have to be somebody who's exactly having my experience. It doesn't even need to be somebody who's having, you know what I'm saying? I just want to see, pretty much when I was younger, I just wanted to see like my gayness validated. Now that I'm older, I'm interested in seeing my experience specifically because what I realized is that it's not enough to just have like the gay experience represented. Because how can I explain it? Like gayness is not a culture, right? And so I found that even though there is gay content out there, there is LGBTQ content out there, culturally, I am an African American. I'm a black person, born and raised in America. And so my culture is blackness. And sexuality is not a culture. And so it's still me as a black person watching white culture. It just happens to be that the sexuality is different, right? It's the same thing as like any other genre of movie or TV show. If I'm a black person and I'm watching white characters, white main characters, I can't. I mean, I can in theory connect on the human level, but in terms of like culturally connecting with the characters, there's a barrier there because I'm not a white person. Um, and so now I kind of demand a little bit more out of quote unquote representation from shows. I want to see black queer people. And it just is the reality situation. I want to see black queer people. And so with the teasers and with all of the imagery around Heartstopper, I immediately noticed there was two is another coming of age high school story about two white gay boys. Or I guess one technically since I've watched the show, one is gay and one is bisexual. And so I wasn't all that jazzed initially to watch it. I think that the only reason really why I watched it is because I wanted to be able to discuss it. I don't know. But I saw that there was at least one black girl in there. And so I was like, maybe she'll play like a sizable role or something. Like, I don't know. I give it a shot. You know what I'm saying? It's not that long. It's only 8 episodes long. All of the episodes I think are like 30 minutes. It's not, it's not time consuming or anything like that. I just watched it in one evening. So, I gave it a shot. And my initial reaction, so we're dropped into, I think it starts off with the main character, Charlie, who's got this weird closeted relationship with a boy at his school. And it's like tumultuous. It's like sometimes he wants to meet up and sometimes he doesn't. It's always got to be in secret. He doesn't want to acknowledge him in the hallways, those kinds of things. And it's like a toxic relationship. He's got this group of friends that he hangs out with. And I think that it's when they're at like lunch or whatever, it's revealed that one of his friends is no longer at the school. Turns out that friend is a trans girl named Elle who has transferred from their school, which is an all-boys school, to the all-girls school that's like up the street or whatever. So pause right there. Let's stop right there. That immediately kind of, I had feelings about that right there. And let me explain. So I have this problem with, and it happens with a lot of shows. I have this problem with, well, actually, let me just do a disclaimer real quick. If you are coming to this review with the hopes that I am going to like gush with you over this show, because I feel like this is the kind of show that attracts the kind of audience that would like to like gush together, like, oh my goodness, this show is just, I apologize. That's just not like, that's not where this is getting ready to go. I think there were good things and bad things about the show, and so I'm going to discuss those good and bad things. But this is not one of those reviews where like I'm gonna gush about the subject matter, the content, or the characters, like that kind of thing. And I'll explain why if you're interested. So the reason, let me back up. So what I was saying is that I have a problem, and this is prevalent throughout a lot of TV shows, where they will take, I would argue, narratives that are far more interesting and make the character who has the far more interesting story like a tertiary character, make them like a background character. It's almost like a sheer force of will thing where they will force cisgendered white protagonists into the forefront, even though they are not as interesting or compelling of characters, that their story is not as interesting or compelling. And it's weird to me that, like, I try to understand the thought process behind it, because it's like, it feels like they're heaping, and I don't want to say that this is what, so the series is by Alice Oseman, I think is how you pronounce it, or pronounce her name. This is based on a series of graphic novels that she's done. It's 4 books. The first one came out in 2018. So I'd imagine that this series is, I mean, the plan is for this series to probably be the 4 books. I don't know. I've not read the books, so keep that in mind as I'm speaking. I don't want to put that on Alice that she has any of the same thought process as some of these other people who produce these shows, right? I'm just speaking as a generalized thing that I've noticed. I've noticed that there are a lot of writers, screenwriters, and playwrights, and novelists, and all kinds of people who will willfully push cisgendered white characters into the forefront as their main character, even though their story is not as compelling or interesting. It's just like they need to be there. And it's like, move them out the way because they're not as interesting. Like, I'm always like, well, that person back there is far more interesting than this person here that you're forcing us to pay attention to. And that's how I felt about this immediately. So you're telling me that there is a Black trans girl living in the UK who has transferred from an all-boys school to an all-girls school, and this is her first day of school, and that is not the main character. That premise alone is far more interesting than anything else in the rest of the show. It just is. Like, I'm sorry. That should have been our main character. And I know that ensemble casts are like a thing right now where it's like we need a group of queer kids together coming of age in high school. But just that one premise alone, I feel like would have been a really cool deep dive if it was like, she is the main character. Let's focus on her and her story, and how she feels about making that transition, going from all boys school to an all girls school. Making friends at this all-girls school, having her identity and gender affirmed at this all-girls school. Like, how do her parents feel? We don't know I don't even think that they showed her parents. How do her parents feel, or how do her parents support her? We get to see how Charlie's parents, or at least his dad, supports him. And we get to see how Tao's parents support, or his mother supports him. What about Elle? You know what I'm saying? I would like to see how her parents, because there's a whole story there. She's transitioned, right? And clearly she's transitioned fairly early, which is great. So that means that there's supportive parents behind the scenes that we didn't get to see. So before I got too deep into having an opinion about that, this actually makes me think of, as an aside, this same thing, in my opinion, happened in the show Grand Army. If you watched Netflix's show Grand Army, it only had 1 season. But a very similar thing happened in Grand Army, is that they had this ensemble cast. Again, it's like, well, we've got a slew of characters that you should focus on. And then they've got, I believe her name was Dominique, was the character that was in that show, who was Haitian. And the show ended with her she had to engage in an arranged marriage for her family to be able to stay in the country or something along those lines. Insanely far. Insane how interesting her story is, right? And she was not front and center, which made no sense to me. To me it says, I question, there's two thought processes that I could see being there. Either A, you're just heaping, you recognize that people of color, Black people in particular, go through all of these hardships, and you're heaping these hardships onto them just because that's how Black people are, and then throwing them in the background. Or it's a willful act to, you know what I'm saying, either you believe that this is just how Black people's stories are, but Black people need to be in the background, or you believe that somehow, I don't even know how to articulate what I'm thinking. I'm sorry. How can I explain it? I'm trying to understand the thought process of a writer to put that much I would argue that many how can I explain it? To put that rich of a character together, like you that is a character that you put together and then put them in the background. I don't understand why. Like, I don't get it. I felt the same way about Grand Army, and I feel the same way about this show too. Now, the actress who plays Elle is an actual transgendered young lady, and she did an interview where she discusses how she feels about the role. Now, obviously, she's going to have great feelings about the role because, um, how often do trans women get to have opportunities like this? You know what I'm saying? How often do trans women get to be, especially in coming of age stories, we're just now starting to get that as a perspective within like high school. And so she says in an interview with Pink News, she said, it's really, really such a rare story that we get a trans character that doesn't delve into gender dysphoria or depression or bullying, but just the positive, the friendship, the chosen family, the moving from an all boys school to an all girls school. Just everything that is natural about being trans is highlighted, and I'm just so happy to be that positive representation that we've needed for so many years. It's Elle, right? It's not about trans women. It's not about Elle. I'm sorry, it's not about trans women. It's about Elle. And she is the most sweet, most lovely, most caring girl ever. And that's the most interesting thing. The fact that she's trans is just part of it. She's allowed to be happy. She's allowed to crush. She's allowed a crush, and she's allowed to be moany and teenage, whatever she wants. Whatever she wants. She continued. She's just allowed to love herself with no society telling her what to do and how to act and how to look and who to love and how to be. She's just her, and I think that's what's so beautiful about the trans story that we have in Heartstopper. And then she went on to add, I definitely didn't have an Elle growing up, and I think millions of trans children around the world didn't have an Elle growing up. I think it'll be good to have that representation, seeing yourself represented in the media from a young age can really help you in the future. So, I mean, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because obviously my feelings around it are inconsequential in comparison to an actual trans woman's experience and an actual trans woman's perspective, right? So if she feels that this is proper representation for trans, which I don't even think it's a representation issue. You know what I'm saying? I don't have a problem. Like, I believe that this is great representation. We don't get to see black trans girls at all, ever. So yes, I just want more of it to be like, that's my perspective. I feel that she should have been the main character. I feel like she was her story, just the if you list the bullet points of her story, you don't even have to go down like actual plot points. If you just list the bullet points of who she is as a person and what she's doing right now, it's far more interesting than the main characters or the main protagonist. It just is. And I think that, to her point, when she was discussing that, she said that the representations that trans women usually get involved, gender dysphoria, depression, and bullying. I think that it's impossible to discuss representation of trans girls or trans women in media without discussing the character Jules from Euphoria. And I have to imagine that's who she's maybe comparing the two to, because they're supposed to be high school. They're both high school age. They're both trans girls. And Euphoria admittedly is brutal. And that's, I guess that's what I will say about the vibe that I got from this show, is that I think that it just aimed to not be brutal, which there's a place for that. I believe that that's a valid, you know what I'm saying, a valid aim, because when you get into doing marginalized communities and their narratives, it's so easy to do the brutal parts, right? I just wanted more out of I just wanted more out of Yasmin Finney's character Elle. So So that was a long-winded initial response. That was like the first like 15 minutes. First 15 minutes of like the first episode. So that I immediately had all of that rush in for me. I don't know. And I just want to make a note of the fact that I'm a Black American person. I feel like maybe there might be a bit of a cultural barrier there just because I'm not British. I wonder how much of that is playing into this as well. Keep in mind that I'm not British. This is a British story written by a British woman, involving British actors at British schools, and you know what I'm saying, those kinds of things. So this is an outsider's perspective, of course. But after I got over my initial reaction, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a chance because just because these are white main characters, just because they're white male main characters, doesn't mean they can't necessarily be compelling characters, right? So, I was like, I'll give it a chance to see if the writing makes, this story a little bit more compelling. Because I think that there are certain parts of the experience that are maybe universal to the LGBTQ experience, maybe particularly the closeted piece. So hold on a second. So the main character, Charlie, is in this closeted relationship with, hold on a second, I didn't pull up the guy's name, the character's name that he's having this relationship with. Ben Hope is the character's name, played by Sebastian Croft. So he's got this closeted relationship with Ben Hope. They've been messaging back and forth on, I believe it was Instagram. They meet in private and like kiss or whatever. Evidently Charlie came out as gay like a few months prior, and I guess Ben Hope kind of saw this as an opportunity. He's kind of closeted, but he sees, that's usually how that goes, right? Like if you come out as the gay kid, all of a sudden all these weird closeted people start swarming around you. So, valid, right? But he ends up like, it's a closeted relationship. So he's not being validated in this relationship. The guy won't look him. Ben won't look him in the eye as they're walking down the hallway. He actively ignores him, and if Charlie says anything to him, he like goes out of his way to say, I don't know who you are, which it seems like all of the people at this school have been going to school together for like years, so it's like, how do you not know who he is? Especially with him having just come out as the gay kid, it's like, of course you know who he is, come on now. But yeah, like just the typical closeted relationship. He's dating some girl to keep up appearances, or I don't know, maybe he actually liked the girl, I don't know. And so obviously this is very heartbreaking and toxic for Charlie. They end up having some sort of disagreement or argument, and Charlie ends up wanting better for himself, which good for you, Charlie. And so he kind of breaks it off. Ben comes and like berates him and says like, who's ever gonna want to like a lot of really toxic stuff there. Who's ever gonna really want to love you or date you or whatever, like really trying to be toxic. Like I don't know why you would ever think that would be the appropriate thing to say to somebody that you're trying to get back, but he was wilding, you know what I'm saying, and doing some crazy. And so in steps, Charlie has kind of developed this friendship with Nick. Is it Nick? Hold on. Is it Nick? It's Nick. Or is it Nate? It's Nick. It's Nick Nelson. His name is Nick Nelson, y'all. He develops a friendship because he sits in class with Nick. I don't know which class it was, don't ask me. And so out of nowhere, Nick comes up and pulls Ben up off of Charlie, and now he knows Ben's secret. So, and I don't know, from there Charlie and Nate kind of develop a really close relationship, and Nate is like I'm sorry, I keep calling him Nate. Charlie and Nick develop a very close relationship, and um I don't know, they Nick becomes very concerned with Charlie's emotional well-being and those kinds of things. Um and so I don't know. It was cute. I'll say that. The story was cute. The progression of their relationship was cute. I can't deny that. It was cute, but it was like maybe I'm just an old dusty maybe I'm just an old dusty curmudgeon kind of a gay. I was like, this is too cute. Thank you very much. It's too much. Um but I feel like to the point, kind of like to the point of like what I was saying earlier, there's a place for this kind of a cute vibe. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like, to me, it kind of gave me the same kind of aura as like a To All the Boys I Loved Before kind of a vibe. Like, not quite the exact same narrative, obviously, and the characters are different, but it kind of gave that same kind of like bubbly vibe, which the gays deserve, no? Um, and so yeah, I think that, but that's the thing that I ended up having a problem with, is the extreme lack of conflict. Like, it felt like there was no conflict. I know that there was bullying, of course. And again, I'm gonna emphasize, I'm a Black American person. Bullying by my standards and bullying by British people's standards, totally different thing. So I'm sure that if you watch this show and you're British, um, maybe it was like, geez, he's really laying into him, this mean dude. Like, you know what I'm saying, I felt that it was cheesy and corny. The bullying in this show was weak, and I don't know. As somebody who's Black and went to a predominantly Black high school, like, you got to develop the skill at being able to like come back at people. You know what I'm saying? You got to be able to, somebody says something crazy and out of pocket to you, you got to be able to come back at them immediately, like quick. Um and I recognize as as an adult that most people who are not Black and did not go to Black high schools do not develop that skill. And it was, I mean, insanely evident in this show. I was like, just come back at him. You know what I'm saying? He seems overly concerned with, let's look up the bully's name. Hold on a second, because I need to know as I'm referencing this. What is his name? Hold on. Cormac Hyde Corin played the bully. His name was Harry. The bully's name was Harry. I was like, come back at this man. He's constantly talking about, he's sitting up here constantly asking you about what it's like to be gay and what it's like to have sex with men, or, you know, those kinds of things. Like, he's pressing you about being gay unprovoked, out of nowhere. Like, he's harping on it. There's a lot of material there to come back at this dude, and they just couldn't. They just didn't. And I just, Tao kind of stood up to him a few times, but a lot of the banter was weak, in my opinion, as a Black American. I know that we be coming at each other in totally different ways, the Brits versus the Americans, and specifically the Black Americans. So I'm just leave that there. But from my perspective, it was extremely lacking in conflict. And not necessarily like conflict between, I feel like, yes, have conflict between characters, but there needs to be like some sort of a worldly conflict within your story, within the premise. There needs to be some sort of conflict, and there wasn't one. Like, what are they trying to overcome, this group of friends? I think that's like, my biggest criticism of this show is that it was very surface level. My initial response to even just like the first episode was that we're missing a lot of exposition. We're missing a lot of backstory for each and every one of these characters. We're missing a lot of internal motivation. We're missing a lot of, and I'd have to imagine that because this is based off of a book series, that all of it's in the books. I have to imagine that that's the case. because when you translate books to TV shows or to movies, especially with Netflix and their weird relationship with TV shows nowadays, where they just cancel all
Listen,
the time, um, you don't get the opportunity to develop it. Maybe, I don't know. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say that all of that exposition is in the books. Being dropped into this show as somebody who didn't read the books, it felt like the characters were kind of empty. And again, there was no conflict. Like, there's barely internal conflict for the characters themselves. Like, obviously, it felt like Nick was the only one who had real conflict, for real, with his sexuality. Um, the other characters, there were some other characters who experienced bullying, but I feel like Nick got over his internal conflict more quickly than is normal. It felt a bit rushed. Coming out of the closet, coming to terms with your sexuality, and maybe I don't know, maybe I just moved slow with that process. It takes years. Usually, if you're at the point where at the beginning of the show you consider yourself to be straight, by the end of the first season, how are you? You've already accepted that you're bisexual. You've already gone through you're in a relationship with somebody of the same sex. You've come out to friends and family. Like, that just feels, in 8 episodes, with each episode being 30 minutes long, it just felt quick. And I believe that Netflix plays a role in that. To be perfectly honest, if it weren't Netflix, then I could maybe see that this was a writing issue. I blame Netflix. Netflix forces people to do things quickly because they're terrified that they won't get a second or third or fourth season. And that's the vibe that I got from this. Is it was just quick, and there was no world conflict. So what is this? What's the group of friends? What are they trying to overcome as a group? They didn't have a world conflict. And not to say that they don't need one, but it's like either we've got this huge world, like, you need to choose. Either you've got a huge world conflict that needs to be overcome. Like, maybe Elle can't get into the all-girls school, and y'all help to get her into the all-girls school. That's a world conflict that would be interesting to me. Or everybody needs to have their internal conflicts. Everybody needs to be going through it. You know what I'm saying? I know that Yasmin said that she appreciated that this was not another story of a trans woman going through gender dysphoria. But even just any emotion other than just, I mean, outside of anxiety around liking somebody, and I don't know, I didn't feel any particular emotions from anybody in this. I mean, everybody was just nervous, and that was it. Like, I didn't feel like joy, pain. You know what I'm saying? I didn't feel it. It just felt like nervousness. It was the entire cast was just nervous. um. So if we're gonna go with the, like, deep, you know what I'm saying, like, character study vibe, then we need all of that exposition that's missing. The other thing too that kind of bothered me, is just an aside, is that Charlie has an older sister named Victoria that they call Tori, and she's all throughout the show she pops in and out, but she's very clearly another instance of somebody being a very interesting character to me. Like, her vibe was very interesting to me, and I wish that she had a bigger part in the show. She very clearly was, like, all of the people who provided the comedic relief. So I would argue that would be Tori and Isaac, the character who's like what would he be, like, the fifth wheel friend? Like, he was barely there, and when he was there, he was just, like, immersed in a book. Like, he was barely there. I didn't understand why he was included in the story at all. Maybe it makes sense in the book series. I don't know. But Tori and Isaac, I feel, were used as comedic relief devices, and both of them were, in my experience, they were interesting and needed to be expanded upon as characters. So yeah, I think that I don't know. It just felt It was okay. Like when you do stories around representation and things like that, sometimes it's okay to just have a story that's just okay. Um, like I said, it doesn't always have to be strife and hardship and I'm having this existential crisis. Even though I would argue, when you're talking about teenagers, teenagers have existential. They just do. It doesn't matter if they're straight or if they're not. It doesn't matter if they're cisgendered or transgendered. All of the teenagers are having existential crises. That's just part of being a teenager. So, I mean, heap it on there. It's not like it's unrealistic, but yeah, it just felt like to me, like I said, there's a lot of these ensemble casts out right now. There's a lot of these like let's have a group of queer kids be the main focus of a show. There's a lot of those out right now. And so you got to stand out in comparison to those in some way, shape, or form. And usually I would argue that people try and do it through the representation route of like, let's just put like a black gay person on there. Let's put a black trans person in there. Like, let's put a trans girl. Let's put, you know what I'm saying? They do it the representation route, but you got to do it the character route. You have to give us the backstory on these characters and why we care about them. Because I don't know any of the backstory on any of the characters in this show. Now that I'm trying to think, I don't know anything about them. I mean, I know their identity, like I know their labels, but I don't know like anything about them as people. And I'm going to again give this a benefit of the doubt and say that it's maybe in the books. I'd have to imagine that's where it is. So, I don't know. I feel neutral about this show. I don't think it was terrible. I think it was cute, but I think it could have been better. But the other thing too is that I think that the version of it that I'm envisioning in my mind is way more dramatic and less of a like rom-com vibe. And so maybe that's my problem. That might just be an internal thing. I'm like, you're telling me that there's a black trans girl who's starting her first day at an all-girls school? Like, that just needs to be a show by itself. That alone. To me. I don't know. I just feel like there was a lot of conflict. There were a lot of opportunities for conflict that were missed. Possibly, like, I got the vibe from the show that it was trying to not be hurtful, that it was trying to not be harmful, that it was trying to just be cute, and there is a place for that. I don't know. It just felt empty to me. Like it needs more. Like I need more character. I need character. I'm not gonna lie. I want both deep character dives and external conflict. I feel like that would make a good show. There's got to be some world conflict against them as a group of friends, and there's got to be all of them having their internal issues. I feel like that would have made a good show, and that's what's necessary to get this kind of a show to stand out against all of the other ones that exist out there, because there's a lot of them at this point. You figure this is contending with, and I mean, a lot of them get canceled. So, I mean, the bar is high to get to even a second season with this kind of a show. I would argue that this premise is the same premise as like Generation that's on HBO Max. It's kind of similar to like the new version of Gossip Girl. What else? Betty is a great one. I want to discuss all of these. I want to discuss all of the queer representation that I've noticed in some of these shows. And so I might just like, I know that I do like hot tops like stuff. I do like hot topics kind of things, but I might just like clear out like a good week and a half or 2 weeks or however long, or maybe I'll pepper it in or something like that. Do episodes on some of these shows that are like a little bit older, like a year or two old, because I got to go over Euphoria. I have to go over Generation. I want to go over Betty. I want to go over Gossip Girl, and I don't know. There's a few on Netflix that I want to go over too. Like my favorite still to this day, my favorite coming of age kind of queer representation story on Netflix. It's like a Netflix original. Is Everything Sucks. I really, really love that show, and I'm so upset that they canceled it. It canceled it after one season, but it was just really good. I don't know. I feel like the in that instance, the characters were very compelling, and you've got kind of got the same kind of like a similar vibe. So they're in high school. Um, you got in this instance, it's a white cis girl who's coming to terms with her sexuality, and she's friends with um, a black boy who has a crush on her, and she doesn't feel the same way that he does, but she feels this way about, of all people, Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney's in the show. Our one of our faves from Euphoria. So yeah, that's still I'm still upset that they canceled that show. I'm so mad. That is one of my favorite queer representations, coming of age high school stories that Netflix has made. Um so yeah, I think I'm gonna take the time out to like review like a few of these shows, because there's some of them, there are parts that I like of some of them. There's parts that I dislike, and I guess I should just be happy with the fact that there's more of them now. Like, none of this existed when I was younger. Like when I was younger, the only representation that I really had was the L Word, which I snuck and watched. I'm sorry. I snuck and watched the L Word. The L Word, I believe, was the only show that I can think of that had gay women. And I remember that's part of the reason why I harp on having representation of actual like black queer people, is because I didn't feel connected to the L Word. It was like late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s white women in, I believe, here in Los Angeles, and their experience being gay. I could not and did not connect to that, and was only watching it because it was the only thing. Like, it was just, that was it. And I don't know. I think that that's part of my frustration when we keep getting more and more shows, right? We keep getting more and more like queer casts. Um but it's never black women. And if it is black women, it's usually in an interracial relationship. Kind of like in this show, but I give them grace because it's Britain, it's the UK. So it's like, are there a lot of gay black women that are going to the same high school in the UK? I can't imagine that there would be. But yeah, just like no representation whatsoever for black gay women, kind of similar to myself. We kind of got it with like Black Lightning, with I forgot the girl's name. Black Lightning's daughter is a gay woman, but the problem that I had with that show is that she dissed two black women to go and date an Asian woman. I get it, love, whatever. I just didn't feel it with that relationship, so that's why I couldn't overcome her dissing two black women to be in that relationship. But whatever. Beggars can't be choosers, I guess. But yeah, I think that's the reason why I kind of harp on it nowadays, is that like I can't fake that I have a connection with that. You know what I'm saying? I can't fake like I have a connection with people just because they're gay. My culture is blackness. I need people who are black and gay. I need people who are black and queer, right? Because that's my culture. I will feel a connection with those people on a cultural basis, outside of sexuality, outside of gender expression, on a cultural basis, because of those things. And so, I've not watched. So like, I'm sure that there's people who are like, well, have you watched? Is it 20 somethings or 20s or something like that? Written by Lena Waithe. I've not watched it. I don't really have the right streaming services to watch it. I believe it's on BET, right? Yeah, like I've not gotten to that. So if that is a great representation, I'd be more than happy to figure out a way to watch it. But for right now, I'm gonna review the ones that I've kind of already watched, and yeah, I'm gonna stick to, just for right now, I feel like I'm gonna take time to review. I might rewatch Everything Sucks just so I can do a review of that one. I want to do a review of Gossip Girl. I want to do a review of Betty. I want to do a review of Generation. I want to do a review of Euphoria. Um, and probably other ones that I can't think of right now. Because that was like really a big thing for me when I was starting this channel. I was like, I want to review these because they're important to me. Because I didn't have this representation when I was little, but it's kind of frustrating. It's frustrating that they're heaping on representation, kind of, but it's just still not hitting this demographic. So that's just kind of frustrating for me. But yeah, so I think I'll just leave it there. I think that's a good length for an episode, right? So yeah, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. If you have like thoughts about the show, if you feel similarly or differently, please let me know down in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts, how you felt about the show. If you've read the book series and you feel like maybe there's a lot of stuff missing out of the show, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. And yeah. So if you could subscribe to the channel, share the video, like the video, I would really appreciate it. And until I see you next time, be good.